Hello, everybody. Um, I realized after trying an experiment with Socratic seminar in first period today that a lot of you guys have not had much experience with Socratic seminars, even though it seems like conceptually you know what they are. From what I saw, I think a lot of people don't. And so I think we're going to have to put a pin in having our first Socratic seminar. On top of the fact that the weather is so awful today that the internet keeps coming in and out for me, and I'm hoping even this video works. So this is going to be your independent class time while um, uh, for making up for the day. For those of you that I haven't taught yet, for that I'm talking to you second and fifth period. But for first period, since we had to stop and kind of go, okay, we clearly don't know what we need to be doing. So let's pause and let's back the truck up, right? So a Socratic seminar, you guys, what is it? You know, that's a big question. What's a Socratic seminar? So that's a question we're going to talk about in this presentation. What's its purpose? That's another question we're going to answer in today's presentation. And then what does one look like? I'm going to talk about that and show you an example. The audio is not great, so you want to make sure to have headphones on and your volume all the way up, probably. But it's the best one I could find that's really doing what I want you guys to do for the most part. Okay. So, what's a Socratic seminar? Well, it's more about the process of question than finding out concrete answers, right? What did Socrates do? Socrates walked around not thinking he knew everything. He was curious about what were the answers, and he genuinely wanted to know what other people thought. And that's kind of the attitude you should be having when you come into a Socratic seminar. What what do other people think, and how can that maybe help me come to a better, deeper, more complex understanding of the story, or the philosophical questions, or the history, or whatever it is that we would be talking about? Okay. And it's okay to not have answers because big questions rarely have definitive answers. There's so much complexity and richness and ambiguity in life, right? And so a lot of these books that we're going to be reading are going to have multiple answers that could be. And what matters is that you guys come together and try to figure out what are some of the strongest answers, not necessarily what's right. Okay. Um, and so together you're going to find the best possible answers, as I said. You're going to try to work together to put your heads together, okay? And it's a process of thinking deeply through inquiry, right? This isn't just surface level study guide. Did you understand the book questions? It's much deeper than that. This is a question based conversation, okay? That's what inquiry means. It's asking, and it's being curious, and it's about digging through the layers to try to find that deeper meaning, right? And as I said earlier, right, about we're trying to be like Socrates, we're trying to mimic him, right? The great Socrates walked around, asked people questions, and that's what you're going to be doing sitting at home. Okay. And what happens is it begins with an open-ended question, okay, to kind of get the conversation started. Not a closed-ended question. That's something you can Google. You want an open-ended question that makes people go, "Oh yeah, good question. Well, maybe blah 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 blah," right? So, and then without raising hands, there's no hand raising, just in a polite, organic, conversational kind of way, people share their ideas of what they think might be a good answer, right? That's all just throwing out ideas. There's no need to have your ego hurt with throwing out possibilities. You're not saying this is it, and if I'm wrong, I should be embarrassed. No, no. It's maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And if you're worried about someone thinking your idea is dumb, which is not true, I guarantee it. But if you're worried about that, why don't you propose your answers even in a question? Why not? Could it be this? Could it be that? That way it's not so psychologically dangerous, right? So remember that it's trying, and you have to always use text details and evidence. So you've got to have your book with you. If it's digital or in print, you've got to have it ready to go and with you, and hopefully have some annotations on it. That's the point. You should always read with a pen or pencil. Always. I'll show you the copy of the plague I have when I see you next. to show you what I just did in the last reading I did. Even though I've read this multiple times before the plague we're in now, rereading it now with you, so it's fresh in my head, I took a bunch of notes like I should, because that is the habit of a deep reader, a deep thinker. And you have to bring up textual evidence or details to support your questions so people can understand what you're getting at, or to support your answers so that you're having that reasoning, right? It's like practice for writing a strong argumentative essay. So you've got your theory and you've got your evidence and your analysis. That's what a good comment would be, right? And so, oops, that got repeated. Whoop, whoop. It begins with that open-ended question, which means it's not a yes, no, simple answer. Okay. You can imagine someone having more than one answer, then it's probably open-ended, right? If it's something like, where did the book take place? Oral. Can you imagine someone disagreeing with that? No one who's reasonable. It's either an oral or it's not an oral. There's no, well, maybe it's really somewhere else. No, it takes place in oral. Okay. So it's got to be something you can imagine someone going, no, it's actually blah, 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 right? So it shouldn't be some simple Google it question that you could point to in the book. Oh, whoopsies. So that was repeated. Sorry. It's last minuting this because of the craziness of the day. Okay. So what's the difference between an open and a closed question? Well, some more things I could tell you is like, here's an example. When did Romeo and Juliet take place? Is this open or closed? Does it sound like something somebody can argue, or does it seem like a Google thing? It's a closed question, right? It's Verona. That's it. Okay. How about this one? Open or closed? In Act 2 of Romeo and Juliet, what did the friar mean by the line, these violent delights have violent ends? Is this a yes, no, simple answer, or is this something that's complicated that people could have different answers to? Yeah, so it's an open one, right? Let's look at another one. How would you characterize Tybalt? If you recall Tybalt. It was Juliet's cousin, the one that had a fight with Mercutio, kills Mercutio, and then Romeo kills him. How would you characterize him? Is that an open or closed question? It's open, right? There's many ways to characterize Tybalt. And you could have some arguing. What does Benvolio's name mean? That was his friend, and I'm not sure if he's a literal cousin because Elizabethans use the term cousin to also just mean like family friend. What does Benvolio's name mean? Is that an open or closed question? It's a closed question, right? It means like good. Bene means good, so it's good intention, good meaning. He's a good guy. He means the best for him. So, no, that's just something you Google. So, I hope you understand kind of the basics of being able to tell the difference between a conversation starter, an open question, or a conversation ender, a closed question. Like, what do you want for dinner? Macaroni. Okay. Conversation over. What is the most delicious food we could possibly eat? Ooh, that's a conversation opener. And people could just go on and on arguing about what's the most delicious thing, right? Okay. So we're not going to do triad Socratic seminars like I usually do. This is a PowerPoint I made for when we're in person, so forgive that part. Ignore that. I usually start off when we're in groups of 3, so we have 2 co-pilots and a pilot, which makes people feel more comfortable to talk, but we just can't do that now. That's not a possible thing. I mean, maybe next time we could think about having assigned partners that plan for the Socratic seminar, and that seems like it's just going to take way too much time. We're just going to have small groups instead. So we're going to have little groups like 6 people per group, okay? So hopefully that won't make it as scary as having a huge room staring at you. But to get full points during a Socratic seminar, what really matters is your thinking, right? And something to think about that I love that Voltaire said is judge a man by his questions rather than his answers. You've got to come prepared with good questions that Show that you're thinking about the story. That's what matters. Thinking deeply, not just what's the plot. Summarize the story for me, right? So it's not so much the answers that matter here. It's coming up with good questions to really get at the truth. And so to get full points for a Socratic seminar, you've got to have a thought-provoking question, like Voltaire said you should. Okay. So you have to have at least one good question for the seminar. And you need to refer to the text directly. Like you got to point to something on a page and read a quote, or you have to give some specific details about something that happened in chapter 2 of part 1. Whatever. You need to be specific about the details of the story to support your question, to help you explain what you're trying to say, or in an answer, right? So you need to also respond thoughtfully. It's not about being right, but it's about having a thoughtful answer. It should not be just, I agree, good answer, good job. It's not just patting each other on the back. You should be adding. Like if you thought someone's answer was good, you should say why it's good and then maybe add some more to that. That's a thoughtful answer, okay? Adding more nuance and detail and maybe examples from the book to help support that person's theory, right? So, and you should be taking notes while you're having that conversation. Have your book or your ARNs or a piece of paper ready to go to kind of write down good ideas, because what if that person had such a good idea, you might want to use it on a paper later. This is putting our heads together. It's not stealing, okay? So you want to take notes, be ready to take notes about something that's really good in there that we could maybe come together when we come back together and debrief. There's something good to say. On top of that, you have an assignment where you have to say something really good somebody else said on your assignment. So you want to be ready for that, okay? And that'll make more sense when we get to that page. I'll show you. And you need to come to Socratic seminars with your stuff. You need to have your ARNs, because that's where your questions come from, right? Remember what I said, you got to have questions in your ARNs. You also want to have quotes to talk about, okay, that are already set up and flagged, right? You also need to have your study guide questions, because that might have some good stuff in there to add to the conversation. And you want to have your book, right? So you need to have the things that were assigned before the Socratic seminar ready to go. Okay, so that's how you get points. Have your stuff done, ask a question, refer to the text, respond thoughtfully. Okay, so I want to share an example, and I want you, in the text box, you're going to tell me some things that you saw that you thought that this group of students did well and what they could do to make it even better. Okay, and to give you some context before I play the video for you, they're talking about a totally different book. I don't want to spoil the whole thing for you, but let me give you some context so you can kind of follow on what they're saying. The book's called The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini, who is an Afghani American writer. Okay, so I don't know if he's from Afghanistan. I think he is, and he immigrated here. But even if he's, first generation, he's considered Afghani American. He wrote this book in English. It wasn't translated from Arabic or Farsi or whatever. I think in Afghanistan they write in Farsi. But in any case, that's neither here nor there. It's a beautiful book that is probably the most painful thing I've ever read in my life. I cried more reading this book than any book ever, like hot mess tears. And it makes paper menagerie look like nothing. You might read it your senior year in AP Lit. And these kids read it for World Lit, and it is a good World Lit book, but it does have an intense thing happen. Imagine the worst thing that could ever happen to a child besides murder. Okay, now keep going. Keep going down that hallway. Now go down that hallway, and now go down in the basement. There you go. Really bad. So it's about these two young friends that are different classes and different, cultures, sort of. It's an ethnic minority issue and a religious difference. The main character, the protagonist who's speaking, he is Sunni Muslim, and he's more the Arabic, Persian kind of looking gentleman, and his little friend is Shia Muslim and more Asiatic, and so he's considered lower class, and a lot of people are very racist towards his class in Afghanistan, and so there's this already set up of class differences dealing with race and religion because it's different branches of Islam, kind of like think Protestant Catholic. Okay, but also know that the Asiatic Shia child is part of a class that's been known to be slaves in Afghanistan, or servants. They're the lowest class. So anyway, they're talking about an incident way later after they're boys, and the boys had an incident occur when they were young that broke up their friendship. One of the little boys, something bad happens to him, and the other little boy that's the protagonist doesn't know how to deal with it because it's so awful. And so he just kind of distances himself, and instead of going to him and supporting him, he doesn't know how to deal with his feelings because it's so awful. And he's a little kid, he doesn't know what to do. And he's scared. So he starts treating him really badly, and kind of pulls away from his friend when he needed him most, and he feels really bad about it. And he eventually immigrates to America and leaves his little friend who was hurt behind, and doesn't keep in contact with him. And he's got this regret on his shoulders. And he found out many years later that his little friend's son's in trouble and needs help. So he goes back to Afghanistan, and he visits his old house where there's this pomegranate tree that they used to play in and under. That was like their little space to play together. So it was and they even like carved their names in the tree. It's like an important place of their friendship, but it doesn't bear fruit anymore. And I wouldn't say dying, but it's not doing well. And so these kids are going to be talking about the symbolism of the pomegranate tree. I want you to notice their conversation. What are they doing? How are they speaking? And to keep notes about how we want to act in our Socratic seminars, okay? So I'm going to hit play, and you guys are going to take some notes, and then I'm going to ask some questions for you to do in the text box. Here we go.
We're going to be talking about the kite runner. First up is the pomegranate tree. So what major theme was the author inferring with the recurring idea of footprint? I think one of the main things was friendship, because it talks about early book how Sean and Amy are hard to the tree. And then Judge Simon, that's just kind of the start of like their history. And I think what's going on that is the tree kind of changes the friendship, like changed, because when their friendship was good, it was going well, and riding the tree very fruit, and had white roses and seeds. And then once their friendship drifted apart and having trouble, then the tree is not very fruit. And also I think it shows that even though that tree is still there, even though it was fruit, just like the bond and friendship was still there, even though it wasn't like first. What else was represented by the utility of the tree? Well, there's my story. I think like their relationship between Hassan and Amir was weird through the relationship between Amir's wife and his of their own, so that they had to take on Sean. And it says on page 264 that the pomegranate tree had formed over years. I think that suggests that because their friendship was kind of dormant, that it wasn't gone, it was just like wasn't ended. Like they both kind of gave up in different ways. And then Amir has to come back to it when he comes back to the end of the novel and restart their life and start being significant again. And like he starts that process of relationship, but it's not significant yet, because the main novel will be that his Hassan's son is he's smiling, but like it's not always there yet. And that's how the tree kind of falls like that. Right after that on page 264, Amir talking said, I found what I was looking for. The carving had dulled, almost faded altogether, but it was still there. Amir saw both of them so I traced the surface of each letter with my fingers. They smelled the bark with tiny crevices. So what does that say about after returning to Afghanistan? What is he trying to do? Is the tree represents their friendship? And the tree dying, what is he trying to do by like he's trying to find the carving and trying to curve each letter out again, but it's like predominantly traced so that you can see it again.
It's like he's trying to like rekindle the friendship with like he's been haunted by not standing up from his vibrations and trying to kind of revive it. And so it's just, just he was just that's his way of trying to build his friendship with him. That's in a whole like the life of the entire yeah, that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to revive that relationship. Pomegranates have a significant role in a lot of traditional culture and religion. They have a really special role as a fertility symbol in weddings among people in the Middle East. So again, it's a fertility symbol for our women able to conceive a child. And in other cultures, it has to do with child abduction. So how do you think that plays into alcohol?
The child abduction could kind of be when the son is taken as a rape. And your parents are murdered, so it kind of symbolizes the infertility of them has like turned into worse and become not just infertility on one side, but like across. Okay, in the Jewish religion, in the story of Adam and Eve on the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it wasn't apples, it was pomegranates on them. And it was represented knowledge of good and evil, it represented knowledge of sexuality and death. So it was vivid, like the knowledge of sexual things were vivid. So how do you think that plays into Seth and his kind of pedophilia nature? What do you think? Well, I think that the pomegranate tree, when Hassan and Amir were friends, it was really vibrant and it was really glowing and it kind of grew with them. But then after the rape, after like the sexual crime, it started to die. And so I think it represented that what Seth found that he faced himself was kind of living, especially by their culture and their religion. So
also, like, in ancient Greece, the pomegranate was the underworld, and Persephone ate the pomegranate, and she was able to leave the underworld. So I think that's significant because in a way, like, once the mirror starts, like, really wrong, it's like she can't leave. So it's just like Persephone ate the pomegranate, can't leave. And the same thing with Seth, too, because, like, a Seth has this living that way of life, and, like, he can't find a way to leave. Well, with the story of Persephone, that she cannot live in the winter fall, I believe. So then I think that kind of symbolizes how what Amir goes through in the winter, because it's just like that time of when he remembers what he's done, he remembers things. And then like in spring and in summer is the time where he kind of forget about that, and then like it's just kind of a positive remembering what he's forgetting. Life until he goes and tries to implement. When you see the underworld, the fruit, all the plants are asleep, that's what they say, so they aren't growing, or placing fruit, and when she returns, they start to grow again, it's all good, the fertility that she brings with her, and life with her. So you could say that the pomegranate tree, as we return, he's redeeming himself and making it fertile again, he's reviving that friendship. So how does redemption play into this? It's kind of like a major role of personal.
Okay, I think you guys have had enough to see the point. So in the text box, tell me, what did you notice that the students are doing the Socratic seminar? What are they doing well? Are they doing all three of the requirements that I asked for? How do you know? Are their questions open or closed? How do you know? Is there anything they can do to improve the conversation? So let's look at, hopefully you guys saw that they were using open-ended questions. They were referring to the book. When someone referred to evidence in the book, everybody went and looked to show that they're listening and really paying attention and caring about what the person's trying to say. They used evidence both in their conversations and their answers and in their questions. They were taking turns and there was no hand raising. The boys do talk eventually if we kept on watching. So it's not just the couple of the 5 girls talking on the left. And notice how they were digging deeper and deeper and adding more and more complexity to the symbolism and the meaning of the pomegranate tree through religious allusions, both for the Judeo-Christian, Middle Eastern, Greek references, but then they were also connecting it to the actual storyline itself and about the setting and about the conflict, and it was just very rich. Like that whole pomegranate tree is just, it's kind of like the pomegranate tree in the Kite Runner is almost like you could say, last year, what did you guys read? Romeo and Juliet? I don't know. I guess the rose. Although no, there's nothing really as symbolic. It's unfair. There's a Lord of the Flies. When we get to that, you'll see there's something just as layered and important. So you need to be prepared to share out your answers and your questions. And to do that, I'm having you guys do a worksheet. So let's look at what types of questions are on the worksheet, what kinds of answers and annotations I'm expecting from you, and what might be the purpose of this worksheet being completed and why it's not a waste of your time. So let me show you the worksheet first, and then we'll come back to these questions that I'm going to ask you. Okay, but I'm going to ask you in the text box a little bit, what kinds of questions are on here? What kinds of answers and annotations am I expecting from you? And what's the purpose of this worksheet? Like, why did I make you do this? Okay, so here's the first part of the Socratic Seminar worksheet. I want you to look at your ARNs or any other book annotations and find 2 open-ended questions and related evidence from the text that you could use in the Socratic Seminar discussion. So I have a little box here for you to type on the document where you've got your questions and you got your text. You want to make sure when you copy and paste your text that you're referring to, that you include the page number, right? So you don't get lost. And so you can help other people by pointing to where you mean, okay? And so you would want to make sure to have one of those questions that are conversation starters, not something you can Google, right? So, and the reason why I ask you to have 2 is because what if somebody asks your question and then you're like, right? So it's always good to have 2. Oops, what happened to the middle part? There's the middle part. That was out of order, I think. No, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. So here's the next part, the initial question discussion prompt. So I'm going to start the Socratic seminars for now because I know it's hard for you guys to get started and you just stare at each other. So the first question everybody's going to start out with is this question. And I want to give you guys a chance to think about it first so that the conversation can just get started, because usually it's the getting started that's the hard part. And this is kind of one of the main questions I want you to be able to answer too. So, and can you spontaneously come up with questions that are spawned off of my question when you guys start your conversation? Of course. Will that count as one of your questions during the seminar? Yep. Okay. Here's what I want you guys to answer, and you would fill out before the Socratic seminar. Okay, you would do the 2 questions, and then you would do the before, not the after, but the before, where you're going to respond to the prompt, so you have something to say. So you got to type it out for yourself. But here's the question this time: what are some connections or parallels to the COVID-19 pandemic you have experienced with the initial plague response in part 1 of the plague? What do you think these parallel reactions say about human nature in the face of disease and death? So I want you to make those connections of what you notice, like the characters and the how people react and the thoughts and feelings and emotions and events. What parallels do you see, and what do you think that says about us? Because there's so much in common, right? It's pretty crazy. It's almost like looking in a mirror. Okay, so you're going to be filling that out. Okay, you would do the after the Socratic seminar, right? Because you might have more nuanced understanding, or you might change your mind. Okay, that's part of the listening. So you would do this after the after part. And then there's a second page also that's post Socratic seminar, which you're going to be filling out all these little boxes with either A, B, C, or NA. okay, which means no opportunity. So A means yep, totally. B means mostly. C means and NA is like didn't get a chance. So you're gonna be scoring yourself, and you don't lose points for being honest. This is your first Socratic seminar. It's about seeing where you're at and making goals for yourself, okay? So, reading and preparing for the seminar, did you do all these things? Listening during the seminar, did you do all of these things? Speaking during the seminar, did you do all these things? Interacting with others during the seminar, did you do all those things? You're going to need to look at this when you're doing the pre writing to see what my expectations are during a Socratic seminar, right? That you've read the text, you've analyzed the text, you've found evidence, you've thought about comments and connections to bring to the seminar, right? That's what those two first questions, if you did it, you should have A's here, right? Listening during the seminar, or did you have your camera on so you're showing respect and looking at one another? Okay. Were you not being fidgety? Okay. Did you wait until the next speaker's finished before you started to talk, or were you having side conversations, playing on your phone, doing homework for another class? Right? Were you paraphrasing what the speaker said, referring to a previous speaker's comments when you add? That's always a good way to show you're listening, right? So you'd say something like, I really like your idea about how this is like that, but furthermore, I'd like to say that I also think la 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 la, right? So you want to show that you're listening by talking about the person's name that we're speaking, that you're referring to, or bringing up things that they've said to show that you were actually listening and not just waiting for your turn to talk, right? And how about speaking during the seminar, right? Was I using evidence? Was I being non-judgmental, right? Was I self-monitoring that I wasn't talking too much? Because I know that's hard sometimes. Some of us were like so excited about a subject and we just want to talk, talk, talk. But we got to remember that we're there to listen too, okay? Especially when we only have like 30 minutes to talk, okay? And interacting with others and all that kind of stuff. So you need to be looking at, how should I be acting? What are my goals? And then at the very bottom of the second page of the assignment is the short answer. And this is why you need to be taking notes. What's something important that you thought that you made to the discussion today? That's you reflecting on yourself. But then what's an important contribution somebody else made? So this is showing that you listened to somebody and they made a good point and you want to name them. So-and-so said this and it was really cool and they said that and it made a lot of sense and now I understand it better, da, 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 right? So you want to explain, what did they say that contributed to your understanding of the book? I'm sure somebody said something of value, okay? If nobody speaks in your Socratic seminar, go ahead and write that down and I'll deal with that, okay? But you've got to talk to get points. I'm going to be recording these sessions so I can go back and pay attention to everybody. I'll be visiting you guys like a little fly on the wall, only talking if you guys are veering off target or you need help because you're not talking, or you're something's not going on well that I need to help, okay? I also attached to this assignment for you a list of some open-ended questions to help you get some ideas. Because when you create your questions, you do need to have original questions. You're not allowed to copy and paste these, okay? You are not allowed to copy and paste these. But could you maybe take these to kind of help you come up with ideas that you could be more story specific? Like number 2 says, what incident, problem, conflict, or situation does the author use to get the story started? Now, that's not the best open-ended question, but I could be more specific and say something like, why did he start off the story with rats dying? How did that affect the atmosphere, the emotional reaction of the audience that it was rats? I mean, why of all things, right? Or how about, we wouldn't do the ending one yet, but who's the main character of the story? That's not an open-ended question, but the what kind of person is the main character? That's a great question. So, who do you think's the main character? Is it Dr. Ryu? It seems like it's following him right now the most. So you'd say, what kind of person is Dr. Ryu, right? So then you could have like and then you would, if you ask that question, you probably want to be even more specific and say, do you think Dr. Ryu is a good person? Why won't he say the word plague? Right? Something like that, right? You want to be asking these kinds of thoughtful questions. Okay. Here's some other ones that are on that sheet, Okay, so just some getting your brain started questions. There's also some getting your brain started questions on the study guide, as I showed you before. So going back to the questions I wanted you guys to answer in the text box, what types of questions are on the worksheet? What kinds of answers or annotations am I expecting from you? What might be the purpose of this worksheet being completed? Why is this not a waste of your time? Okay, guys. Hopefully this helps you understand what my expectations are and what a Socratic seminar is. And I will see you guys on Wednesday to talk about the district essay prompt. See you then.